Why? At 18, my stepmom left her baby with me, then spread lies that I forced her out, and my dad kicked me out. After he passed years later? Why? She returned for his estate, only to learn he'd already signed legal control over to me. Her meltdown was impressive. Why? I replayed the security footage on my tablet, watching her get escorted off the property by the deputies I hired. It wasn't petty revenge. Why? It was the only language Olivia understood. But before the justice came the silence. Before I could win, I had to survive the basement. Back then, why? Home felt more like a prison cell than a sanctuary. My room was a converted storage space beneath the kitchen. Why? Complete with cold concrete floors and exposed pipes that rattled whenever someone flushed upstairs. I learned to identify footsteps by weight alone. Why? My father's tread was hesitant, soft, like he was apologizing for existing. Olivia's steps were sharp staccato strikes. Why? Always hunting for a violation. Living down there wasn't just about lack of space. It was a clear message about my standing. Why? I was the dirt beneath the floorboards. The humiliation was codified on a whiteboard hanging near the fridge. Why? Olivia called it the household contribution system. A colorful grid designed to make starvation look like a teaching moment. Why? Every chore I completed earned points toward privileges, like using the washing machine or accessing the Wi-Fi for schoolwork. Why? My name was the only one listed. Olivia didn't need points, she owned the marker. I scrubbed floors until my knuckles cracked. Why? Chasing a moving target. If she found a single streak on the tile, she wiped my score to 0. One Tuesday. Why? The smell of roast chicken drifted through the vents, making my stomach cramp. I walked upstairs, exhausted from school and chores. Why? And reached for a plate. Olivia intercepted me, her manicured hand slapping the counter. Why? She pointed to a speck of dust on the baseboard I had cleaned an hour ago. Incomplete task, she chirped. Why? Erasing my dinner points with a squeak of dry erase marker. My father sat at the table, staring into his peas, deaf to the cruelty. Why? He didn't offer me a plate. He just chewed slowly. I stopped arguing and started disappearing. Most evenings, why? I escaped to the machine shop, where I swept floors for cash under the table. The noise of grinding metal was more soothing than the silence at home. Why? Roger, the shop owner, noticed me lingering late one night. He tossed me a protein bar and leaned against a lathe. Don't spend it, he said. Why? Nodding at my cash. Save your exit money. Some traps you don't fight your way out of, kid. You buy your way out. I took his advice. Why? Banking every dollar while Olivia tightened the noose. A month later, she called a family meeting. She stood by the fireplace. Why? Glowing with a rehearsed smile, hands cradling her stomach. We're expanding, she announced, looking only at my father. Why? She didn't say I was getting a brother. She said the house needed new energy to heal. I saw the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't just a baby. Why? It was my eviction notice. The house began to fill with gear, and my space vanished. 6 months later, the house wasn't just hostile. Why? It was occupied territory. Olivia's parents arrived with 4 suitcases and an eagerness to critique my existence. Her mother, why? A woman who wore jewelry that clanked like chains, surveyed the living room while I hauled their heavy luggage. He's still here, she asked. Why? Not lowering her voice. Olivia sighed, resting a hand on her swollen belly. We're working on his independence. It's a process. I set the bags down. Why? Ignoring the heat rising in my neck, they looked at me like a stain on the carpet. The nursery became my prison sentence. Why? While Weston worked overtime to pay for Olivia's nesting instincts, I was conscripted to build the furniture. Her father sat in a recliner. Why? Sipping iced tea and pointing out my flaws. That screw is crooked. He barked. You don't have good hands, do you? Why? No focus. I tightened the bolt until my knuckles turned white. The crib cost more than my first car would. Why? Every turn of the wrench felt like I was assembling my own replacement. I kept my mouth shut, knowing any protest meant punishment. Why? Jace arrived on a stormy Tuesday, and with him came the theater. The hospital room was filled with flowers and photographers. Olivia held the baby for exactly as long as the shutter clicked, beaming with a beatific glow that vanished the second the guests left. Why? Take him. She snapped at Weston, rubbing her temples. He smells like formula. My father looked exhausted, dark circles bruising his eyes. Why? But he took the bundle without complaint. I watched from the doorway, realizing the baby wasn't a person to her. He was a prop. Why? Once we were back home, the mask slipped entirely. Olivia refused to wake up for night feedings. Why? Claiming her energy levels were too fragile for disruption. Weston, beaten down by work and guilt, took every shift. Why? He paced the hallway at 3 a.m., a ghost in his own house, while Jace screamed. I listened from the basement. Why? The crying filtering through the vents like a siren. It wasn't just fussiness, it was distress. Olivia slept soundly upstairs. Why? Her door shut tight against the noise. The silence from her room was louder than the baby's wailing. Why? I stopped trusting my memory and started trusting hard data. Using the cash I'd hidden from the machine shop, I bought 3 cheap security cameras. Why? They were the size of dice, easily hidden on bookshelves and curtain rods. I wasn't trying to spy on their private lives. I was building an alibi. Why? If Olivia accused me of stealing food or breaking a vase, I wanted proof. I installed them while everyone was out, my hands shaking slightly. Why? The blinking red lights were taped over, invisible in the shadows. Now, the house was watching back. One night, Weston collapsed on the couch. Why? Dead to the world, while Jace cried in his bassinet. I walked upstairs, intending to wake my father, but stopped. He looked broken. Instead, why? I picked up the baby. Jace was tiny, red-faced and trembling. He quieted the moment I held him against my chest. Why? He grabbed my shirt with a fist the size of a walnut. I walked the kitchen floor, swaying slightly, feeling a strange weight settle in my gut. Why? He wasn't an intruder anymore. He was a hostage, just like me. I warmed a bottle and fed him. Why? Watching his dark eyes track the movement of the ceiling fan. He didn't have Olivia's cruelty or Weston's fear. Why? He was just a blank slate waiting to be written on. I burped him gently, and he fell asleep on my shoulder, heavy and warm. Why? The camera in the corner recorded the whole thing. I realized then that I wasn't just documenting my defense. Why? I was gathering evidence for a war I didn't know was coming. The baby shifted, sighing, and I knew I couldn't leave him. Why? Jace was 4 months old when the cracks in the foundation finally split wide open. Weston came home holding a printed itinerary for a fishing trip. Why? It's just 3 days. He told Olivia, his voice pitching up like he expected a fight. The guys from the warehouse invited me. I really need this. Why live? He looked desperate, a drowning man reaching for air. Olivia didn't argue or scream. She just smiled that thin, paper-cut smile and shrugged. Why? Go, she said too easily. Everyone deserves a break. When he left, the kitchen felt pressurized. Lie. Weston kissed Jace and ran out the door before she could change her mind. I was eating dry toast when Olivia walked in. She wasn't wearing her robe. Why? She was dressed in designer jeans, pulling a rolling suitcase behind her. Where are you going? I asked. She zipped her purse with a sharp, why, metallic sound. My mother's, she said, checking her reflection in the microwave. I need support. Why? This house is draining me. What about Jace? The question hung in the air. Olivia adjusted her sunglasses, refusing to meet my eyes. Why? You can handle it, she said, as if asking me to water a plant. You are 18. Why stop acting helpless? She placed Jace's carrier on the rug and walked out without looking back. Why? Don't call unless it's life or death. She threw over her shoulder. The door clicked shut. I waited for the car engine to fade before I exhaled. Why? The house was suddenly, terrifyingly quiet. I didn't panic, I couldn't afford to. I locked the doors and moved the essentials downstairs. Formula? Why? Diapers, and the bassinet went into the basement. I wouldn't roam the upper floors and risk leaving a mess she could weaponize. Why? I treated it like a deployment, setting up a changing station on my dresser. The basement wasn't a nursery, but it was a controlled environment. Why? The cameras watched us from the shadows, blinking their silent red approval. I grabbed a spiral, bound notebook. If I was going to be the parent, I needed a paper trail no gaslighting could erase. I logged everything. 10 a.m. fed 4 ounces. 10:30 a.m. diaper wet. Jace wasn't difficult. Why? He just needed a rhythm. Once I established a cycle, he settled down. I fed him, burped him, and rocked him, my movements mechanical but careful. Why? I was terrified of breaking him, but my hands seemed to know what to do better than my brain did. By the second night, exhaustion was physical. Why? I slept in 2-hour snatches on the concrete floor. The basement was cold, so I kept Jace wrapped in fleece, holding him against my chest for heat. Why? In those quiet hours, my resentment toward my father burned off, leaving something harder underneath. I looked at Jace's sleeping face. Why? Illuminated by the space heater's orange glow, and realized we were the same. We were just baggage they checked in and out when it was convenient. Why? 72 hours bled by, without a single ring of the telephone. I checked the landline to make sure it wasn't unplugged. I checked my cell. Nothing. Why? Olivia hadn't called to ask if her son was alive. She had erased us. On the third afternoon, I sat on the floor with Jace. Why? The logbook filled with proof. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The front door opened upstairs, heavy footsteps echoing. Why? Dean. My father's voice called out, confused. Where is everyone? Weston stood at the bottom of the stairs. Why? Blinking at the makeshift nursery I'd built on the concrete. He saw the stacked diapers, the formula cans, and the sleeping infant in my arms. Why? She left. He whispered, his tan fading to a sickly gray. For 3 days, I didn't answer with words. I handed him the notebook. Why? He flipped through the pages, reading the timestamps of feeds and changes. The reality of her abandonment hit him, like a physical blow. Why? Leaving him breathless. Before he could speak, the front door slammed open upstairs. Olivia's heels clattered across the hardwood. Why? Fast and aggressive. Weston, she screamed, descending the stairs like a storm front. She saw Jace in my arms and stopped. Why? Her face twisting into a mask of theatrical terror. Oh God, she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. I came back early because I was so scared. Why? I couldn't leave him with that hostility. She pointed a shaking finger at me. He forced me out. Weston looked between us. Why? Confusion clouding his eyes. Live the logbook. Dean took care of him. Olivia snatched the notebook from his hands and threw it on the floor. Why? He manipulated you? His energy is dark, Weston. I feared for my life. She began to cry, but there were no tears, just loud, practiced sobs. Why? He cornered me emotionally. I had to flee to protect my sanity. It was a performance worthy of an award.
Why?
And I watched my father's spine dissolve into dust. Weston rubbed his neck, his conflict, avoidance kicking in like a survival reflex. Why? He looked at the weeping woman, then at his son holding his other son. Dean, he said softly, avoiding my eyes. Look, she's really upset. Why? Maybe we just de-escalate. I tightened my grip on Jace, feeling his small heart beat against my ribs. De-escalate what, Dad? Why? She abandoned her kid. Weston winced, shrinking into himself. Just apologize for making her feel unwelcome. Please. For the family. That was it. Why? No, I said, my voice flat. I walked past Olivia, who flinched as if I were holding a knife, and placed Jace gently in his crib. Why? I didn't look at her. I went to my corner of the basement and grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed months ago. Why? I pulled the memory cards from the hidden cameras, slipping the evidence into my pocket. They were arguing now, Weston pleading and Olivia shrieking. Why? But the sound was already fading into background noise. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked to the stairs. Weston grabbed my arm. Why? Where are you going? You can't just leave. I pulled away, not angrily, but firmly. You asked me to apologize for keeping your son alive, I said. Why? I think we're past fixing this. I climbed the steps, leaving the basement darkness behind for the last time. Why? Olivia shouted something about my toxic presence, but I kept walking. I didn't slam the front door. I closed it quietly. Outside. Why? The air tasted cold and clean. I walked to my beat-up sedan, tossed the bag in the passenger seat, and started the engine. Why? I didn't look back at the window where I knew my father was watching. I drove to the machine shop and slept in the break room that night. The next day, I changed my number. I spent the next 5 years building a fortress of solitude, thinking I'd never have to see them again. Why? I was wrong. 5 years of silence ended with a knock at midnight. I was 23, living in a clean apartment that smelled like coffee and peace. Why? I checked the peephole and froze. The man in the hallway wasn't the father I remembered. He was a scarecrow draped in oversized clothes. Why? Leaning heavily against the frame. I undid the deadbolt. Weston didn't smile when the door opened. He just looked at me with wet, terrified eyes that were far too big for his shrunken face. He stumbled inside, gripping the sofa like a lifeline. His hands trembled violently. Why? The skin translucent enough to show the blue map of his veins. I didn't know where else to go, he rasped. His voice was a dry rattle. Why? He told me the diagnosis in fragments between coughing fits. Stage 4. Why? It had been eating him for months while Olivia burned sage, and told him his pain was just a spiritual blockage. Why? She had hidden his appointment reminders. She says the doctors are poison. Weston whispered, staring at his shaking knees. Why? She canceled the chemotherapy, Dean. She said we couldn't afford the bad energy. I sat across from him. Why? Feeling the cold rage I thought I'd buried years ago. He wasn't just sick, he was being harvested. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw anger in him. It was weak, but it was there. I failed you, he said. Why? I can't let her take everything else. He pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket. It was a life insurance policy. Why? The only thing he had kept hidden from her. I need to fix this while I can still hold a pen, he said. I don't trust her, Dean. Why? Not with the house, not with the money, and not with Jace. The mention of my brother snapped me into focus. What do you need? I asked. Why? He took a ragged breath. I need you to take legal control. Tonight. I called Rachel, a contact from my firm who specialized in estate law. Why? She met us at her office at 1 a.m., wearing sweatpants and a sharp expression. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Weston looked worse. A ghost haunting a leather chair. Rachel wasted no time. She laid out the documents: a living trust, a will, and a medical power of attorney. Why? This locks her out, Rachel explained, tapping the paper. But you have to be sure, Weston. There is no going back. Weston didn't hesitate. Why? He signed his name with a shaky hand, but the lines were dark and permanent. With every signature, he seemed to gain a little strength. Why? As if reclaiming his life on paper. He named me sole trustee and beneficiary. Then he looked at Rachel. Why? She thinks I am going to die next week, he admitted, his voice dropping. I overheard her on the phone. Why? She's already asking about the payout timeline. The room went dead silent. We left the office with the file folder thick and heavy in my hand. Why? It was 3 a.m. when I drove him back to the house. The front yard was littered with healing, wind chimes, and flags that snapped in the wind. Why? A wooden sign by the door read, Sanctuary of Light. I helped Weston out of the car, feeling the heat of his fever. Why? We walked toward the door armed with the pen strokes that would destroy her world. The house smelled like rotting lilies and burning sage. Why? A cloying sweetness meant to mask the scent of sickness. I walked Weston to the master bedroom. Why? Ignoring the crystals lined up on the floor like barricades. Olivia appeared in the doorway, wearing a flowing white shawl. Why? Her eyes wide with theatrical outrage. You cannot be here, she hissed, blocking my path to the medicine cabinet. Why? Your energy is toxic to his alignment. I didn't stop moving. I set my bag on the dresser, sweeping a pile of quartz stones into the trash. Why? I am staying until the end, I said. She lunged for the phone, threatening to call the sheriff for trespassing. Why? I pulled the medical power of attorney from my jacket and slammed it on the nightstand. Call them, I challenged. Why? I have legal authority over his care, his visitors, and his treatment. If you interfere, I'll have you removed. She froze. Why? Staring at the notary stamp like it was a hex. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, in law, why? Her manipulation hit a wall of hard statutes. She retreated into the hallway, muttering about vibrations, but she didn't call. Why? I spent the next hour turning the healing center back into a hospital room. Why? I threw out the herbal pastes that were irritating his skin and organized the morphine schedule the hospice nurse had prescribed. Why? Weston watched me from the pillows, his breathing shallow and wet. He looked small in the king-sized bed, a prisoner in his own home. Why? Thank you, he whispered, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Don't let her back in here alone. I promised him I wouldn't. Why? I set up a cot in the corner, establishing a perimeter she couldn't cross. Later that afternoon, I found a ghost haunting the hallway. Why? Jace was 5 now, a quiet shadow with unwashed hair and socks that didn't match. He peeked around the doorframe, holding a stuffed bear by its arm. Why? He didn't recognize me at first, but he recognized the tension. Is Dad okay? He asked, his voice barely audible. I knelt down. Why? Realizing Olivia hadn't fed him or bathed him in days. He's resting, I said softly. I am Dean. I am your brother. Jace didn't smile. Why? But he stepped closer, starving for any kind of stability. While I managed Weston's pain, Olivia managed her audience. Why? She hosted grief circles in the living room, filling the house with strangers who chanted and drank wine. Why? I heard her performing her sorrow through the floorboards, talking about her immense burden and spiritual fortitude. Why? She never came upstairs to wipe Weston's face or moisten his cracked lips. She only came up to pose for photos near the doorframe, looking tragic. Why? Before heading back down to collect sympathy. I locked the bedroom door, but the bass of their chanting vibrated the walls. By day 4, why? Weston couldn't swallow. The hospice nurse explained the transition, her voice professional and kind. Why? Olivia burst in while we were adjusting his pillows, holding a bowl of muddy water. He needs to drink this, she commanded. Why? It's charged with moonlight. The nurse tried to intervene, but Olivia pushed past her. I stepped in. Why? Grabbing Olivia's wrist before she could pour the sludge into my father's mouth. He is NPO, I said, my voice ice. Nothing by mouth. Why? You're choking him. She glared at me, hateful and wild. The breaking point came 2 nights later. I woke up to the sound of drums. Why? Olivia was trying to lead a shaman into the bedroom, a man in a poncho carrying a rattling stick. Weston was in the active phase of dying. Why? His breathing ragged. Get out, I said, standing between the bed and the door. He needs a cleansing. Olivia shrieked, her mask slipping. Why?
You are blocking his transition.
I didn't argue. I shoved the shaman backward into the hallway and slammed the door in his face. Why? I opened the door again just enough to speak. Olivia stood there, shaking with rage. If you or your guests try to enter this room again, I said. Why? Loud enough for the shaman to hear. I am calling the police and having you arrested for elder abuse. I have the logs, Olivia. Why? I have the photos of his bed sores. The color drained from her face. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She turned on her heel and marched downstairs. Why? Taking her circus with her. The house finally fell silent, leaving only the sound of the oxygen machine. I brought Jason to the room. Why? He climbed onto the bed, curling up next to Weston's legs. It's okay? I told him. You can say goodbye. Jace rested his head on the blanket. Why? Watching Weston's chest rise and fall. My father's eyes opened one last time, glassy and distant. He looked at me, then at Jace. Why? And a profound relief washed over his face. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But his hand relaxed in mine. We sat there for hours, a small, why? Broken fortress against the world outside. At 4 a.m., the rhythm stopped. There was no struggle, just a long exhale that didn't find an inhale. Why? I checked his pulse, felt the stillness, and noted the time. Jace was asleep, unaware that he was now an orphan. Why? I pulled the sheet up to Weston's chin, covering the shell he had left behind. I didn't cry. There wasn't time for grief yet. Why? I heard Olivia downstairs, laughing on the phone, unaware she was a widow. Weston was at peace, but my war was just beginning. Why? The funeral was less a memorial service and more a coronation for the grieving widow. Olivia stood by the open casket and head, tiptoe black lace. Why? Dabbing perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, while her parents accepted condolences like visiting royalty. Why? He is finally at peace, she told a neighbor, loud enough for the back row to hear. Why? I did everything I could to save him from the darkness. I stood in the far back, holding Jace's hand. Why? He was wearing a suit I'd bought him, because Olivia hadn't bothered to dress him. 2 hours later? Why? The atmosphere shifted from somber to predatory inside the lawyer's conference room. Olivia sat at the head of the mahogany table. Why? Flanked by her parents, looking bored. She checked her watch repeatedly. Why? Clearly annoyed that this legal formality was delaying her celebratory shopping spree. Let's get this over with, she sighed. Why? Waving a dismissive hand at the attorney. We all know the standard procedure. Why? The spouse takes all assets. Her mother was already browsing luxury real estate listings on her phone, ignoring Jace coloring quietly in the corner. Why? Rachel entered the room carrying a single red folder, her expression unreadable but sharp. Why? She sat opposite Olivia and placed her hands flat on the polished wood, commanding instant attention. Before we begin, Rachel said, "Why?" Her voice crisp and professional. "I must clarify the current legal standing of the estate." Olivia scoffed, leaning back in her chair with a smirk. "Why? It is community property. I am his wife." Her father chimed in, pointing a thick finger. "Just read the will so we can leave." "Why? We have dinner reservations." "Actually," Rachel said, sliding a thick document across the table. "Why?" "Weston updated his estate planning 5 weeks ago." Olivia froze, her smile faltering. "He established an irrevocable trust." "Why?" "Moving all assets, including the primary residence, savings, and life insurance policies, out of his personal name." Rachel paused. "Why?" Letting the heavy words land like stones. "The sole trustee and beneficiary is Dean." The silence that followed was absolute. "Why?" Olivia stared at the paper, as if it were written in alien hieroglyphs. Her mother stopped scrolling. The air left the room instantly. "Why? This is a forgery." Olivia shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table. "He was on heavy medication." "Why?" "He wasn't competent to sign anything." Her father jumped up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You manipulated a dying man!" "Why?" "We will sue you into the ground." Rachel didn't flinch. She produced a second document. "Why?" "I have a sworn affidavit from his attending physician attesting to his lucid state, signed that same night." "The trust is ironclad." "Why?" "You have no claim to the house or the money." Olivia's eyes darted around the room, realizing the bank accounts were gone. "Why?" She pivoted instantly to her last leverage point. She grabbed Jace's arm, yanking him up from his coloring book, hard enough to make him cry out. "Why?" "Fine. Keep the money." "Come on, Jace. We are leaving right now." Jace yelped, dropping his crayon. "I don't want to go," he whimpered, pulling back. "Why?" Olivia dug her nails into his shoulder. "I am your mother," she hissed. "You are coming with me." I stood up, blocking the exit. "Why?" The conference room door opened again, and a woman in a gray blazer stepped inside. Olivia stepped back, recognizing the badge on her belt. "Why?" "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice cracking with panic. "This is caseworker Miller from Child Protective Services." I said. "Why?" "You remember the investigation you thought went away?" Miller opened her file. "We have the hospice logs, Mrs. Weston." "Why?" "We have documentation of medical neglect, abandonment, and unstable living conditions provided by the trustee." Olivia looked at her parents for help. "Why?" But they looked away. "We are implementing a safety plan immediately," Miller stated, stepping between Olivia and the boy. "Why?" "Jace will be placed in the temporary custody of his brother pending a family court hearing." Olivia screamed, a raw lie. Ugly sound that made the receptionist look through the glass walls. "You can't take my son?" I stepped forward, handing her a final envelope. "Why?" "And this," I said, "is an eviction notice. Since the house belongs to the trust, you are trespassing." "Why?" "You have 2 hours to remove your personal effects before I change the locks." Olivia lunged at me, claws out, but her father caught her arm. "Why?" Realizing the game was completely lost. "Don't," he hissed, pulling her back. "Why?" "You will go to jail." Rachel nodded to the security guard by the door, who stepped in to escort them out. Olivia was sobbing now. "Why?" Stripped of her money, her house, and her victim, all in 10 minutes. "I will ruin you," she screamed as they dragged her into the hallway. "Why?" "Everyone will know what you did." I just watched her go, impassive and unmoved. When the shouting faded, the room felt incredibly still. "Why?" I looked down at Jace, who was rubbing his arm where she had grabbed him. He wasn't crying. He looked up at me with wide, hopeful eyes. "Why? Do I have to go back there?" he asked quietly. "No," I said, crouching down to his eye level. "You are coming home with me." I picked him up. "Why?" And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel heavy. He felt like the future. We walked out the back exit. "Why?" The sheriff's deputies stood by the driveway as Olivia loaded the last of her designer luggage into her sedan. She didn't look back at the house. Why? And she certainly didn't look at Jace. When her taillights finally disappeared around the curve, the silence that followed was heavy enough to bruise. Why? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a janitor staring at a spill that had taken 20 years to create. I changed the locks myself. Why? The deadbolt clicking shut with a sound like a gunshot, sealing the tomb. I spent the next 3 days purging the interior. In law, why? I wore a respirator mask to block the cloying scent of sage, tossing her velvet shawls and quartz crystals into black contractor bags. Why? Jace followed me room to room, holding a trash bag open. At one point, why? He picked up a heavy, healing stone from the mantel and dropped it into the bin with a dull thud. He looked at me for permission. I nodded. Why? He smiled, a small, secret thing. Even with the house empty, the walls felt infected. The master bedroom still held the shadow of Weston's deathbed. Why? And the basement still smelled like my lonely teenage years. I called a realtor on Thursday morning. "Sell it as is," I told her. Why? I don't care about the market value. I just want the liquidity. I wasn't selling a home. I was liquidating a crime scene. Why? We slept on air mattresses in the living room, camping out until we could escape the address forever. We moved into a 2-bedroom condo on the other side of the city a week later. It was beige, boring, and gloriously anonymous. Why? There were no wind chimes, no dark corners, and absolutely no basements. Jace walked into his new room, running his hand over the clean white walls. Why? He placed his few toys on the shelf with extreme precision, as if waiting for someone to sweep them away. "Is this mine?" he asked. Why? Pointing to the bed. "Forever," I promised. That evening, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the living room. Jace knocked over his juice cup. Why? Sending purple liquid across the laminate. He flinched violently, throwing his hands up to protect his face. Why, bracing for the scream that always followed accidents in the old house. I didn't yell. I just grabbed a paper towel. "It's just juice." "Why, Jace?" I said softly. He lowered his arms, trembling. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, then froze. Dean." I pretended I didn't hear the slip. Why? But the words settled in my chest, heavy and warm. I finished wiping the floor and tossed the towel. "You can call me whatever you want," I said. "Why?" "Just don't call me late for dinner." He giggled, the tension finally snapping. I lost the father I wanted, but in the wreckage of that house. Why? I became the father my brother needed. I locked the front door, finally safe, and turned off the lights.